And I thought what Danielle maybe can do, but it doesn't have to be very detailed, but just to give an overview, because what I understand is that as you probably know, that there's an initiative from the provincial government to basically allow more than one house on every single lot anyway. So then it may affect our submission, for cluster housing, simply because some things would be already mandated by the provincial government. Also, what I noticed actually in Gibsons, because we do some work there, but there's another application in Gibsons for duplexes that actually need rezoning. And so what council plans to do there is to waive the public hearing. And again, the community.
So, Fritz, I might interrupt you just because we're still just on the agenda.
Yeah,
so
but I'm saying is that's the reason for adding those items, because I think they, if Danielle can give a bit of a review of that before we go through analyzing the different points, because some of them it will come up. You know what I mean?
Okay. Yep. So let me go to Daniel.
So to finish that, I also think that Bowen Island has more pressure to make sure that the official community plan is in good form, because now the provincial government basically says that if an application meets the OCP, it simply has to be approved. Now, I don't know how successful it will be that because there's always organized opposition against everything. But having said that, these things are so major that I think it would be nice if Danielle can do that, and it should maybe be more like as a first item or something like that.
Okay, great, thank you. Daniel, can I just throw that quickly to you? Are you prepared just to quickly ad-lib an update? Okay, so why don't we add that at the beginning of the committee of the whole discussion? Just the first thing we'll discuss is if you could give an intro to that, because I think it will, I think Fritz is right, it might potentially inform our discussion. Is that good timing, or Daniel's there better? That's a good spot.
And
I'm not sure that
that's
what Fritz was intending. I thought you wanted Daniel to report to this meeting.
So in our meeting discussion, because in 5.1 is us discussing what we want to talk about.
I thought you were going to add it to the committee of the whole with council agenda, not our discussion at 5.1. Okay, I'm fine.
Yeah, no, okay. Yeah, and we'll finalize the agenda, I think, at the end of 5.1. That's the idea. Yeah. So everybody's good with that? Thumbs up? Yep. Okay. Any other comments or questions on the agenda? Nope. Okay, so everybody in favor? We can do a first and a second. Everybody unanimously. We can. I keep forgetting that term. Steph, what's the term? And I know the mayor uses it like it just says like unanimous consent or something, right?
Oh, we can do it by unanimous consent. No objections.
Yeah, no objections. Right. Perfect. So we'll just try to do that to move some things along. So adoption of the minutes. Hopefully everybody had a chance to review. Tim, I think you had a comment you wanted to make on the minutes. Is that right, or does anybody else?
No, I don't have a comment.
No? Okay. I think if we wanted to look at the minutes, does anybody else have any comments or suggestions, changes they want, or everybody's good with the minutes? Yeah,
I'm good with the minutes.
Yeah. Okay, great. So let's do no objections. And all right, so moved. It's going. Okay, trying to keep things moving along here. Okay, public comments. Is there anybody? I know we do have a couple of members of the public here. Thanks you, Mark, for attending because you're on the agenda later. Amiko, I'm sure you're here for the next item. Did anybody want to say anything before we get started? Nope, hearing nothing, we will move along. So number 4.1, council referral. I will turn it over to Daniel.
Okay, thanks, Robin. I just have a short presentation to give you an update on this item. Okay, is that showing up okay? Okay, so this is about bylaw 598 and rezoning application at 8 Arbutus Bay Road. So that is located on the south coast of Bowen, sort of south of the golf course. So just by way of recap, this came to council at the February 27th meeting, gave first reading to this amendment bylaw to allow the property to rezone at that time to create seven residential lots and a park dedication. And one of the things council had asked was to have negotiations about a cash in lieu contribution for the affordable housing policy. And so the Housing Advisory Committee met April 17th. Hang on, we did this one first. So, and the committee at that point made two recommendations. So you wanted to see bylaw 598 amended to allow 2 additional lots to the project. So looking at making the project financially viable, but also the benefit increased contribution to the Affordable Housing Reserve Fund and the ability to have some more diverse forms of housing within that future subdivision and development. And then you provided a formula for council to consider for how to calculate that contribution to the Housing Reserve Fund. So looking at the gross floor area of the proposal and the maximum floor area. So essentially looking at what's the increase in the floor area over what exists in the zoning to what is proposed, and looking at a rate of $7 per square foot to calculate the contribution. So I have that all here, essentially a recommendation to include 2 additional lots in the rezoning and have a formula for calculating the cash in lieu contribution. And so after that meeting, the applicant, so this was the original rezoning proposal that went to council in February with the 7 lots and the park dedication, with this large lot number 3 towards the north of the site. So the applicant went away and revised their design based on that direction in terms of looking at how would it work with 2 additional smaller lots. And so what they essentially did is they took that lot 3, they did rejig the road, and there were some changes that came about because of a revised environmental report that identified additional riparian areas and triggered some changes to the design. But in essence, what took place was dividing that lot 3 into, you see the north, sort of in this top corner, lots 8 and lot 9, and then a shared septic field. So they'd have 2 smaller lots, but because of their size, they wouldn't actually house the septic. There'd be a common septic to the south of those 2 lots. And so there it is a little closer where the road comes in, cuts through, and there'd be a lot 3, the larger residential lot, and then 2 smaller lots, 8 and 9. And so what we did as staff is we prepared an amended bylaw number 598 to show now in this area 2 would permit 3 lots. So allowing the 1 larger lot and 2 smaller lots within the area. And we brought that back to council in June. And so council, in essence, agreed with the Housing Advisory Committee's recommendation. So they rescinded first reading of the bylaw that had the 7 lot version. They amended the bylaw to include 2 additional residential lots in area 2. And they gave first reading to that amended bylaw and then referred it out again to committee. So it's gone to the Islands Trust, who responded favorably. It went to the Advisory Planning Commission Wednesday night, who supported it, and went to the Parks, Trails, Greenways Advisory Committee in July, I believe, who had some comments about the overall park layout. And then we're here today for the Housing Advisory Committee as well. So that's essentially the update, that we brought your recommendation back to council. Council, in essence, agreed with the recommendation, revised the bylaw accordingly, and then we're doing referrals again. And then following that, we'd be looking to get second reading from council for the bylaw and then go to a public hearing. So that's my presentation. Does anyone have questions or comments?
Great. Thanks so much, Daniel. I really appreciate always your presentations. It's so methodical with all of the steps. So I really appreciate it. Really refreshes my mind. And I remember our robust discussion to get to that formula. So I certainly don't have any questions or discussion points. Does anybody else have questions or want to discuss any items? I'm certainly in favor of, I guess, a recommendation that this, go ahead. So anybody have any thoughts or questions?
I think it's great.
Yeah, I know it's been a long process, and I'm sure for the clients, the owners that are here on the line too. So I know it's been a long process, but hopefully a successful outcome for everybody in the end. So I'm not seeing any comments or anything. So I guess, is there a resolution, Steph? Is there like a proposed?
Would you say that that they support then? So I don't see that the original.
Like we support the
Housing Advisory Committee. Sorry, Daniel.
Oh no, go for it.
That the Housing Advisory Committee support bylaw. Sorry.
598.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh, I can see the recommendation in the agenda is like that we recommend the following. And so we recommend that, council move forward with this, with the proposal as shown, as stated, or something to that effect. I mean, I think we can sort of all agree to the general sentiment. I don't know how specific we have to be with the words at this point.
Okay.
Do we want a specific to move forward to second reading, or the Housing Advisory Committee concurs with the bylaws presented at our blah blah meeting?
Yep, that sounds great. That concurs with the bylaws presented. And
that. Oh, Bone Island should be there. Sorry. Sorry, Daniel, did you like that? Move forward to second reading?
Yep.
Proceed to next reading, second reading.
To second reading as proposed. Or, yeah, as written, something like that.
Okay. Okay.
Maybe say, rather than propose, say presented.
Thank you.
Great. Okay, I'll move that one. We have a seconder. I can't quite see everybody. So, yep. Thank you, Allison. All in favor? Pretty hands up. I don't see anything. Okay, great. I think that's unanimous.
There's nothing in your music library.
Oh, there you go. Okay, thank you, everybody. Thanks, Daniel. And thank you, Miko, for coming to all of the different meetings and working through it. Yeah, congratulations. I'm glad it's moving forward. Yeah. Great. Okay, so we will move along to the next one, 5.1. This, I think, will be the bulk of our discussion today. So we have the Committee of the Whole coming up on September 25th, so in a couple of weeks. And so we have a few items here that we're hoping to put on the agenda. So I think basically my goal at the end of this discussion of this item is that we have sort of an agenda that we as the Housing Advisory Committee would like to, be the discussion points during that Committee of the Whole. Steph, can you remind me how much time do we have scheduled for the Committee of the Whole? Is it like an hour or 2 hours? I just want to make sure.
An hour.
An hour. Okay.
Daniel and the council.
The agenda planner says 3:30 to 5:30.
Oh, 2 hours.
I guess I don't know if that's been set yet or if that was just a placeholder.
Yeah. Okay.
I've got a calendar invite. Just a minute. I'm checking it. Okay, hang on. It says 4:30 to 6:30.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh.
Yeah. Oh, right. So I guess it changed. So we've changed our council meetings, so they happen at 1. So now we'll be doing committee whole after council instead of before council.
Okay, that's good to know. Okay, so yeah, let's. I just wanted to make sure we didn't, because if we only had an hour, we'd obviously have to be pretty selective. But 2 hours is a nice time, and hopefully that'll allow for some good discussion. So currently we have on the list the cluster zoning report.
Robin.
Oh, actually, sorry, I just remembered. Allison, were you going to say we're going to have Daniel do that little talk right at the beginning?
Well, yeah, but I was also going to say maybe we should plan on an hour and a half on the basis that the council meeting might run a little later. They might want to stretch their legs or something. Yeah.
Okay.
And then if we go more, if we go fill the 2 hours afterwards with lots of questions and discussions, great. But
yeah. So that's great. Let's just keep in mind what, the important things that we want to discuss. Daniel, why don't you go ahead and give us an update as Fritz had sort of requested on these changes that you're aware of to date.
Sure. What's the best thing to do? Okay, so in April of this year, the province put out a report called Homes for People. And it had a number of actions that the province was looking to take. And in particular, most interest to me, so this is some of their strategies: unlocking more homes faster. So they're looking to change restrictive zoning, make it easier for people to build small-scale multi-unit homes. And then it has this language that says, this fall, we will introduce legislation that will apply to many areas of the province and will allow up to 4 units on a traditional single-family detached lot, or 3, depending on the size type of lot. And that's essentially what they've said so far. So, that's kind of the update. It's sort of a question mark. Like I've asked the ministry, and I've asked staff several times that like, if the language said it'll apply to many areas of the province, I've asked, is Bowen part of the many areas, or is Bowen not many areas? You know, it's kind of vague. I was actually at a wedding over Labor Day, and I was sat at a table with somebody who works for the Ministry of Municipal Affairs, and I asked her a couple times, and she said, well, we're introducing legislation in the fall session. And I was like, is Bowen part of many? And she's like, that's a good question. You know.
Very good at her job by the sounds of
it. Yeah.
That's great.
So it is a question that could impact Bowen a lot, or Bowen might not be part of it, and it might not affect it. Yet the other change that has happened recently is the public hearing piece. So what has changed in the Local Government Act is it says, so we can't adopt an OCP bylaw or a zoning bylaw without a public hearing. The language now says a local government is not required to hold a public hearing on a proposed zoning bylaw if there's an official community plan in effect for the area and the bylaw is consistent with the official community plan. So if somebody applies for a rezoning, that's just a rezoning that doesn't need an OCP amendment, council is not required to hold a public hearing. And what the change recently was, previously they had an earlier version where the language was something like a local government may waive the public hearing. And they changed it because essentially they found that no local governments were using that waiving, and local governments were just doing public hearings. So they changed it to try to make it clear that like we're not required to hold a public hearing if it's consistent with an OCP. We have done it a couple of years ago. So the previous council, there was like this tiny rezoning of for a lot line adjustment along Bowen Island Trunk Road, where two adjacent lots were in different zone variations. And there was a lot line adjustment to take place. So it was like 100 square meters were changing from one zone to a slightly different zone. And council waived the public hearing for that one. Yeah, so if there are ever rezoning applications that don't need an OCP, it's true, it doesn't need to have a public hearing, which I guess would be the case for the Arbutus Bay Road rezoning that we just considered, that it would be an option for council. Well, it would be an option for council to not hold a public hearing. The caveat being that if you're not holding a public hearing, you need to give notice of first reading of the bylaw. So you have to kind of decide when the bylaw first comes that you're not going to hold a public hearing because you provide alternate notice.
Anybody else can jump in. I feel like the public hearing thing maybe isn't as crucial for us to discuss. I mean, it's an interesting point, but unless I'm sort of missing something, I don't feel like that's as important. But the one that we discussed at the beginning that Fritz brought up was this potential, overlaying provincial legislation that might immediately allow for a lot more density, which is interesting. I just want to go, Greg, I did see your hand come up earlier, so I just wondered if you had a thought that you wanted to get out now.
Well, it depends on whether it applies to us, but in that when Daniel highlighted the stuff, it said putting more density, but there was another caveat saying on service transportation routes, and I don't know if that is a factor in our situation.
Right, it says with additional density permitted in areas well served by transit. So it might be that, well, if you're close to a skyline, the limit is 8 units per, or 6 units or something. It goes beyond. The other piece that the Homes for People does say is they're looking to essentially, I forget the wording of it, but it's to do with secondary suites and looking to require secondary suites in single family zones. That doesn't apply to the majority of Bowen. There's only a couple of our zones that don't permit secondary suites, but they could be impacted with the caveat that I'm not sure. Generally, areas that don't allow it have to do with servicing numbers. So I'm not sure how that would play out. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank
well,
you.
I think it's probably, thanks, Greg. Thanks, Daniel. I probably think it's probably an important point.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think one of the key things also is that it's more important for Bowen to have the OCP updated, and a lot of applications get stuck because the OCPs are not consistent. I mean, like the actual document doesn't. If you go through the whole document, it doesn't facilitate what you want to do. So I think that council should put pressure on getting that OCP in a form that it actually reflects what council wants to do. But I think this kind of important. The other thing which is really important about the public hearing, the most difficult thing for developers and architects is with the public hearing at the end, that all hell breaks loose at the very end when people have spent tons of time and tons of money. You know what I mean? So it takes huge amount of resources. What this effectively does, it forces the public to say what they actually mean at first reading. That's how key it is.
Okay. Great. So I think that would be a good thing if we start sort of drafting out this committee of the whole agenda. I think that would be a great thing, maybe Daniel, at the beginning, just to mention that this is something that's coming. I would prefer not to spend too much time discussing it, just because at this stage it's such an unknown, but more just giving an update that, hey, this is a change that's coming. And then once it is actually announced, it will certainly be worth a more robust discussion. And I think it's something we could add to the Housing Advisory Committee agenda. And then that's something that could then filter up to council once we know more details. So I don't want to preferably take up too much time in the committee of the whole, because we do have such a limited time with council and mayor. So, but yeah, great to bring it up, I think, and just make them aware. I like to think this is going to be an update on kind of the current situation of housing on Bowen in the province, and then we'll get into more robust discussion on a few key points that we as the Housing Advisory Committee think are important for council and mayor to know about. I saw Tim kind of manually raise his hand first, and then Allison. So go ahead, Tim.
Just a point of information that council has already scheduled a strategic planning session for October 20th. And my understanding is that's when we're going to start talking about one of the things on the agenda will be the OCP.
Great, that's really good to know. Thank you. Allison, go ahead.
Well, I guess with respect to the upcoming legislation, we've got UBCM coming up on the 18th, and there's a couple of different sessions that are dealing with housing. And the premier often makes announcements in his speech at the end about upcoming legislation. So we may get a bit more of a hint before we have the meeting on that. And I guess the other is, I think there's the public hearing, but then I think I'm guessing that any legislation that comes down that mandates the 4 units, extra units on a lot, it won't matter what our OCP says. That's going to be provincial legislation. And they have done some mandating of additional housing needed in certain communities. You know, they'd hit West Van and the district of North Van and a few others. About a couple of months ago, I guess that announcement came out.
Okay, yeah, great.
Yeah. Daniel,
did you have anything to add there? No?
I was just going to say, yeah, so that's a good point, that there may be an announcement at the UBCM. And then, yes, their housing act, and then there's sort of discussion about like a naughty list. So they had 10 initial, and they had then like 40 something more. I always point out to people that there were only 3 lower mainland communities not on the list, and they were essentially UBC, so electoral area A, Tsawwassen First Nations, so all the development happening around on the Tsawwassen First Nations land, and Bowen. We were the 3 that were not on the naughty list in terms of housing development.
Interesting. Okay,
yeah.
Great. Okay, so I think that will be a point. So we'll have first an intro from Daniel on this possible new provincial legislation, and there may very well be an update from council members who are at UBCM, which is great. The second, I think we can make it clear we recommend and support an update at the OCP, which sounds like it's on the agenda for strategic planning. So again, I don't think we'd spend too much time on that in this particular meeting, and maybe that's something that we can say, you know, if council does move that, have a strategic in their strategic planning, move that to a high priority. That's something the Housing Advisory Committee can certainly advise on and discuss more in future meetings, as it'd be great to have that direction from council and then really dig into it. So I'm looking at our agenda and the other items that we had already from before. So the cluster zoning report, which I guess Daniel, so there's several items: cluster zoning report, housing targets report, the CEDC staff housing survey, the business license report, and the Birch survey. So are those all, we'll obviously include them as information items in the agenda. do you think it's worth, like, are we going to have presentations on
Yes.
those? And actually it'd be, yeah, so Allison and Tim, I was going to kind of ask your feedback. What should we have brief presentations on the key points of those items?
I think so.
Yeah, okay.
Because this is also going to be beneficial to the public.
There, yeah, that's a fair point too. Yeah. Okay, so
5 minutes each.
Each. Okay.
Max.
Yeah. Okay, so let me just put that down. So 5 minutes max.
Well, some of them might take a little more, some of them might take a little less, but you know, you've got 5 items, 6 items, so that's half an hour if you did 5 minutes each, including Daniel's presentation.
Okay, so
Want me to share my screen, Robin? I'm kind of keeping notes on this.
Oh, sure. Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah.
And this list was, I kind of hobbled that together. I'm not a
yeah, no, and I think it was,
so
we discussed it a little bit as well too. Like, I think we've been telling you, hey, add this. So no, I think it's come from sort of a collection of discussions, which is great. So I think that's a good idea. Okay, so maybe Daniel, you and I offline can email a little bit, because I can sort of do a little presentation on a couple of them, and you can do a little presentation on a couple of them. And sorry, sidebar, Steph, I feel like, did we ever extend an invitation to members of the CEDC committee to attend? I can't remember.
No, I don't think so. And it's such a new group. The people have changed, but I will. So they might need some orienting to it.
Okay.
But I can take that on as an action.
Sure, only if it's going to be useful. Like, I just thought, oh, if there was somebody who had worked on it who would be more suited to maybe do a quick 5-minute presentation on that report.
Councillor Nicholson and Councillor Allison, you worked on that as well.
On the yeah.
So can you present that?
Well, I will figure out who's doing what afterwards.
Speak to it.
I've got a
problem. You're not on the CDC anymore, so
yeah, I got a problem with agenda items 1 and 2.
Okay.
I think they the upcoming legislation should be it should just be part of the presentations.
Okay.
And then the HAC recommend OCP update prioritization, I think, should be very much at the end of the whole thing, because it sort of will fall out of.
Okay, so why don't we just brainstorm all the items, and then at the end we can work on the order, because I think let's just get all the items on there, and then happy to discuss the order of things and everything. And again, that's also something we could work on offline, but just as we're together, using our time together as a group, let's kind of get into the discussion of what are the items, what do we think. I mean, we can discuss priorities. People who think there's certain ones that are really important, more important than others. And are there any of these that we as a group today want to use our time to discuss a bit more before we do? I mean, I think the cluster zoning report's pretty straightforward. I'll do a quick 5-minute presentation. I think we've done a lot of work on it. It's basically, hey, we recommend that, you know, Bowen adopt this zoning. The housing targets report, I think, is basically information. Same with the Birch housing surveys, information. Staff housing reports, information. And
business
then
license reports, information too.
Yeah, information. So it's pretty much, those are just kind of informational here. Let's look at the lay of the land. Let's see what's, you know, what's the current state? What is the information and data we have? Where are we sitting now? And then I think maybe then it would be like MRGT, I think, is a really worthwhile discussion point. So more rather than, sorry, I know I just said let's not organize these, but if we're organizing them, maybe let's say like those are information points, those ones that you're talking about.
Okay, so
yeah. So I think all of those ones, upcoming, everything from A to E are informational.
Okay.
So then I'd say, oh, sorry, F as well. F is also informational. And then what G?
You're going to have to do an education on what the MRDT is.
Sure. Yeah.
Because none of them understand it.
Yeah. So I think then, so in my mind, that's more like point number 4, and we'll do an introduction to what it is and the state of it, and then get into a discussion as to, you know, why we think it's important to move forward. So that would be one. And so I'm just looking around for my notes. And then, yeah, that one. Okay. Let me just find my notes here.
So are you suggesting that G MRDT become point 4 rather than part of that?
At this stage. Yeah. And then what I'd like to add is like a discussion point, or a discussion, and it'd be interesting to have today, because I'd like to get feedback today and it sort of is part of the discussion that's a later agenda item for us today, which is the Birch MOU. Because so what I've realized, I'm going to just speak freely here with everyone. What I've realized is as Birch and in discussions with staff and everybody, we were sort of trying to move ahead with an MOU. And what I had this realization as part of those discussions is I feel like Birch and a few of us are like at step 5, and I feel like council is at step 1. And they're just not, so exactly like we're saying, they just don't have all the information. They're not seeing the same things we're seeing. So I'm thinking, okay, we're moving too fast. We've jumped ahead. We're excited about it and we can see why we want to move forward with it. But I think we're just going way too fast. So what I'd love to do is take the time at this committee of the whole, take a big step back. And like I say, don't have like formal language for it, but essentially the sentiment is, and I've kind of got it written down, let me just refer to my notes here, is to have a discussion with council that says, what is the best way for Bowen to move forward with creating non-market housing? And I'm happy for this group to discuss what that sentence is and the wording, and if it's non-market housing or some other word, but that's the sentiment. I think you get what I'm saying, is what is the best way for us to move forward? And so what I did was I brainstormed a few different things, and maybe Steph, I'll share my screen because I've already kind of got these notes written up. And let me see. And apologies everybody, I'm kind of on one laptop and screen and everything's a little messy here at the moment. So let me see if I can share my screen. Share screen, and I might just do, here we go. I can just share the Word doc, I think. So is that working? You can see the Word document? Yeah, okay. So these are ideas, me collectively with discussions with people, I brainstormed to present. Again, this is sort of an informational beginning, like Alison said, like let's present information, let's educate. And then once everybody's on the same level of education information, then we can have a really robust discussion as to how to move forward. So, and then this is what I'd love to get the collective input from the group here today. So these are the things that I, with discussions with others, brainstormed. So the models that we can to move creation of non-market housing forward. The current, business as usual, which is essentially local volunteer organizations, doing their thing, with varying levels of support from BIM, and having the affordable housing policy and relying on private market to basically build and develop, which has resulted in some units. I would argue very slowly over time, but it certainly has resulted in some. Another option is a housing corporation, and this was discussed at length 10, 15 years ago with the work that was done at the time. From my knowledge, a housing corporation was actually approved, but for various reasons never formed. So that's there. And then in contrasting to a community land trust, and we did have this discussion a bit back at Housing Advisory Committee, I see a housing corporation being much more directly involved. So they would be an organization, they'd be developing, they'd be managing housing, they'd have a developer's type mindset, but more for community and non-market housing, versus an option for community land trust, which is more about stewardship, facilitation. They would be it would be an entity that would work towards partnerships, collaborations, those kinds of things. So I see those, that's kind of how I'm distinguishing. Again, happy in a few minutes to have a discussion on that. Another option is a housing development officer. I think there's communities out there, and I think Tim could probably give us examples, all these different ones, and discuss them. BIM could actually hire a person that's a housing development officer, and that's their job. So it's sort of about what I'm trying to get at with these is like, how do we get either a person, an entity, an organization, something to be, for lack of a better term, the cheerleader, the charge, the person leading the charge to get housing, non-market housing, whatever that we want to call it, built on Bowen? How do we want to move it forward? So, and then the item points to consider on all of these options are funding, which is obviously very important. Once you get a direction, what is the legal structure? I'm not sure how critical that is to various discussions, but it's just something once we land on something to figure out. What is their mandate? Who sets the mandate? Board makeup, responsibilities, deliverables. So those are all kind of the details to consider. And yes, some of those might be discussion points as we talk through the options, but I also don't want to get caught too much in those details. I think I'd like to keep it a really high level discussion. What is the best way to move that forward? So what I might do is stop talking, see if there's anybody who has, and I suppose I can't see everybody at once when I have my view like this. I'm just trying to see, oh, there we go. Now I can see you. Does anybody have any initial thoughts or comments or ideas of what I'm kind of presenting here? So I'll just kind of open it up. Is there any?
Robin?
Yeah, Fritz and then Tim, yeah.
I thought that Bowen Island Municipality, or called council, could be on that list as well. because there's all kinds of initiatives that a council can have to basically to enable or to give incentives for rental housing. I don't know if this is legal at the moment, but I think municipalities now pre-zone for rental. Like it really helps because it affects land values and it instantly clarifies that it's not just residential, but it is actually rental residential, right? That means a whole bunch of decisions don't need to be made. So, but this is an example. So like if, I don't know how maybe Tim can say how, or Alison can say how something like that could be instigated, you know?
Yeah, and that was going to be my question too, Fritz. It's like,
to help you along.
Yeah, who brings that forward, right? Like who brings that to, because council has like, you know, dozens, if not hundreds of things on their plate that they're managing. Planning department has dozens of things that they're looking after. So what I'm putting forward is, yeah, who brings that forward to council? Like we as the Housing Advisory Committee, I think are doing some things and bringing them forward. We're also a volunteer committee with limited time and limited resources. So we do our best, but you know, we meet what 8 to 10 times a year. We kind of do what we can, but yeah, I think that's a great point, Fritz. There are fantastic ideas out there. We've brainstormed them, we've made recommendations, but how do we actually take all those fantastic ideas and really get them moving? And my thing is in a more timely manner. I think we could keep doing what we're doing, and yes, in another 10 years, we might have another 10 units built, great, but how do we actually address the urgency and how do we actually get them built faster? So yeah, exactly. Things like you just said, who brings that to council? Tim, you had your hand up next.
Well, yeah, following up on what I'm hearing here, the point is council and staff and the recommendations of the Housing Advisory Committee can all enable affordable housing, but who's going to deliver it? And that's why I think we need a housing corporation. The Community Land Trust, well, we've talked about this before. I think that the housing corporation model is a better one, and that it just assigns responsibility, local responsibility, and it means funding and a position to actually work day to day on creating more opportunities and delivering on them. And we need that. I call it the sort of the center of the hub. We've got all these various groups looking, wanting affordable housing, but not being actually able to deliver it. So, yeah, and the number 4 option of having a municipal housing development officer, in my experience, that doesn't work well, and it's, you know, an extra cost to the municipality, and it's better to have, I think, somebody removed. A housing corporation has its own board of directors, and certainly it would make sense if someone from council and municipal staff sat on that board, but I think it's better if it's somewhat removed from being right inside the municipality. So, which is, I mean, why I've been working at creating some sort of partnership between the municipality and Birch, because as far as I can tell, Birch is the only candidate we have to do this. And the other thing is, I don't think we want to burden. I don't think we need a complicated agreement here. I think we just need to agree that Birch is going to do that work for us. And, you know, I mean, this is open for discussion. We can hear what the rest of council has to say. But I really think that's the direction we need to go.
Okay.
That's great, Tim. Thank you. And I'm glad you brought it up. So I did want to, and I meant to say this earlier, I want to make it very clear. Birch is here as a resource. We're here, we're ready, we're willing, we're available. but we just want this to move forward. So if it's determined that some other way forward is the better way to go, like I'll make that really clear to council when we do this presentation, we just want to be supportive of that. Like that's all we want to do is help this move forward. So if it's creating a housing corporation and that's something totally new and different, great. Like we'll transition, we'll do whatever we can to support that. Yeah, so we're not fishing for like, this isn't, us leading into the MOU and like fishing for that. It's more of like, we just realized we were kind of running with something and we need to take a step back. So if council at the end of this discussion says, hey, this is the way we want to go, and hey, Birch does seem like the best candidate, let's kind of head in that direction, wonderful. And if they don't, then yeah, let's work towards that. And so I just wanted to make that really clear. Birch and the whole board, we've always been, it's not about us. We don't care if it's Birch or somebody else. We just want to get this built. And case in point, the Miller Road project, we partnered with Lookout, who are an awesome partner. They're going to do a fantastic job. When we get this built, I'm crossing my fingers here, we'll get the funding. And so we just want to see it built. And it's not at all about who does it or how it gets done. We just want to be here. We're a resource. We want to be supportive. Tim, I did want to just ask you a quick question. Do you think I've missed anything? So I had these 4 options. Again, this is brainstorming and from various discussions with various people. Are there other options I don't have on here that we should present to council and for them to consider? And don't, if you think of it through our discussion today, jump in, but I just sort of wanted to put that. Do you think there's something obvious that I haven't put here?
No, and this is plenty of options.
Yeah. Well, and I think, to be honest, I think in the end, what it's going to be is some sort of hybrid version, right? Like, I don't think it's going to be these. I just want to sort of make the presentation to say, hey, here are different models that are happening. Maybe we as a committee have a suggestion by the end of this discussion, or maybe we have 2 that we think we should focus on. Maybe it's a hybrid, maybe we don't. And we just say, hey, here's the options. And we really just want to get into a discussion. That's what I'm looking forward to as a committee of the whole. I want it to be a really, hopefully in-depth discussion from mayor and council. They can ask questions, they can understand the models, they can ask for our recommendations. We have Tim here is a wonderful resource. We have like other people in the room with great resources and views. Let's all discuss what we think is the best way to go forward for Bowen. I also want to stop talking. So is there anybody else who has questions or thoughts? And I would love to hear from other members of the committee. So Greg, Lois, Ron, I keep wanting to call you Gloria because that's your name on the screen. Jump in. I really want to hear your viewpoints. So Greg and Ron, I saw your hands go up. So Greg, why don't you go ahead and then we'll hear from Ron.
This is good and exhaustive and lots to consider. One question that was floating in my mind is, and I'm new to this operation, but and you likely considered this, but are there other similar sized communities that are doing similar kinds of endeavors that have had some success, or is there any are there any other places in the country that we could look towards for success stories in the development of processes for housing?
I think that's a great question. And I think that is something that I and Tim might have some immediate answers. And then what I'm thinking, and actually Mark, we have a wonderful resource here, a member of the public, Mark, he can probably jump in with a couple of things. And then also that's a great point to do a little bit of research. So whatever we discuss here today and stuff, I think that's wonderful. Who's done this successfully? What's the model that they've used? What lessons can we learn from them? So we're going to jump to Tim and then Mark to hear those. And then Ron, I haven't forgot about you. So Tim, to sort of answer Greg's question.
Okay, and I think it'll be very interesting to hear from Mark as well on this. I worked in the affordable housing consultant sector for over a decade, close to 2. And frankly, I worked with a lot of communities around BC. I certainly, in my work with the Whistler Housing Authority, looked at lots of communities in the Western states, some of the resort communities that were comparable to Whistler. And there was a lot of success with their housing organizations in those communities. But frankly, in BC and the rest of Canada, there hasn't been a lot of success. There's been a lot of talk. I spoke to many communities, talked about forming a housing organization. In the end, I formed my own Fox Club and would present strategies that usually involved the municipality coming up with land or assisting in coming up with land. And then we would take everything from there. Everybody would nod their heads, the staff and the council, And then when it came to the decision about the land, for whatever reason, it would never move forward. And in the end, I just stopped doing that consulting because it was so frustrating. So in my experience, the only community that has really made significant headway is Whistler. And you know, so that's a model that I'm very familiar with. Obviously, it was part of, and I don't think there's anything that compares to it. In Vancouver, 20 years ago, I was trying to get something like that going in Vancouver. I think it's moving now and a little bit, and I would be curious what Mark thinks about that. But and maybe Mark, you know about some other examples, but I'm not aware of any.
Yeah, Mark, why don't, if you know some, yeah, give us some of your insight.
Wow. Well, let me offer two things. At Tomo, we're a bit of a housing nerd. And so what we can do is compile and organize some of the research that we've done, including looking, there's lots of things published. I imagine that people around the table also has. So as a volunteer, maybe Robin and I, we can put that together, and then we'll put a lens through what Greg mentioned, which is maybe we'll focus on the ones that we think has the characteristics, municipalities with characteristics closest to Bowen. So we can do that work. It'll be interesting for us as well. And then the second thing is, Robin, a suggestion is your top line, the one that is intended to be a guiding question, perhaps add two things. Some goal could be bold. It could be around a number of people housed or number of housing built, something people can work towards as a bold goal, and then putting a time frame like by 2020X.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you, Mark, and thanks for that offer of helping to do some volunteer work. And Greg, that was an awesome question. Like, great. I think that's absolutely we should be looking at. Like, we do not need to reinvent the wheel. Let's see what other people are doing and what's working, and then jump on that. Allison, is yours in remarks or question in relation to this discussion, or should I go to Ron for his and then you?
No, this is to do with the models to consider. So I don't know whether it would be included under Housing Corporation. But Metro Vancouver Housing Corporation, I think, should be sitting there as one of the options.
As an option to, okay, so
yeah, well, if we're wanting a corporation to build housing, there's one that already exists within Metro Vancouver.
Yeah, so but that would be okay. So I hear you,
and they build housing
yeah,
throughout the region.
Yes, and we've had discussions with them. So that would be, I think. It would still need somebody on Bowen, in my opinion, to be a champion and to coordinate with them. I don't think it's like we can just say, hey, Metro Vancouver, you're in charge of our housing here on Bowen. And that's what I'm hoping to get out of this discussion is who on Bowen is going to be the person, the organization, or whatever, to be the person to lead that charge and coordinate. I still think we need somebody on Bowen on our side to then work with organizations like the Metro Vancouver Housing Corporation, like Lookout, like others, to then make it happen on Bowen. So I think they're an important part of the discussion, but I don't think they're the be all end all answer. So I think, yeah, we'll definitely mention them. And there's others, like I say, we can mention Lookout, we can mention, there's other organizations out there that are doing this that I think would be very willing to partner with us if we can facilitate it and make it happen. Yeah. Ron, I wanted to go to you. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Well, first let me say, Robin, that I'm hesitant to say very much because unlike most of you, I've got no direct experience in development, but I guess a couple of things occur to me. First of all, if we were to partner with the Vancouver Metro Housing Corporation, then I question whether we would need our own housing corporation. Alternatively, if we were not to partner with Vancouver Metro, if we were to go the housing corporation route, does it make any sense to start in that direction without a funding or financial plan? That's
so, yeah, so two great questions. And Ron, I want to jump in because you always put yourself down that you don't have much to contribute, and you always do. And so you as a member of the public and like not with development background are a very valuable member of this organization, of this committee. And I want to just make that clear so that if people are thinking about joining the committee, you do not have to have development experience. You don't have to have any sort of those, because your voice is just as good. Like, you come up with great questions. You know, Greg's a realtor, so he's involved in the industry, but not necessarily in development. He comes up with great questions. So like, it's just every voice is valuable here, and every viewpoint. And I really appreciate what Allison said earlier, is that this committee of the whole is not just about our discussion with council, but also the public, right? So the members of the community are also going to watch these videos. They're going to have similar questions to you, Ron. So you bringing those questions up now is very valuable. So I appreciate you, and I'm glad that you're here. So I want to just quickly respond. So yes, and Metro Vancouver Housing Corporation, they are a housing corporation, but I don't think they would replace our own. You have to, I think of them as almost like another nonprofit, like a Lookout, like all the various nonprofits that are out there developing housing. They just happen to be under the umbrella of Metro Vancouver. So I still think, again, it could be a variety of these things. We need somebody as a connection point on Bowen to be that person leading the charge. And sorry, Ron, I forgot you had a second point or question. I meant to write it down and I forgot.
If we did have a Bowen Island Housing Corporation,
yeah.
Do we have the funding or financial?
Oh, funding. Yes, thank you. That's a great thing. And exactly. And I think that is a really key point. And that's why I put it as like the first item to discuss. Once we have an idea of where we, and it might be part of the integral to the discussion, but we need to sort of head the direction. And then exactly, the funding is a critical part of it. And that's why we definitely want to bring the MRDT into the discussion, because I see that as a really, really simple way of getting some funding started to go towards an entity like this or a role like this. But I think you're right. That's totally critical. That's something that has to be discussed. Where is that coming from? You know, is it coming from out? Yeah, it has to come from somewhere. Tim, did I see your hand go up? Oh, and Lois, I'd love to hear. Tim, is yours related directly to Ron's comments, or should we go to Lois first?
It's directly related.
Okay, so we'll go to Tim first, and then Lois. I want to hear your thoughts. Yeah.
To Ron's comments and to yours. I think we already have a partnership with Metro Vancouver Housing Corporation. Jonathan Cote, the new manager, director, has been over to Bowen. We've met with him. He's very supportive, but it still needs the person on Bowen Island who wakes up every day saying, how can I deliver? What can I do to actually deliver this housing? What's the land that's available? Where you know, who are we going to get to design it, or do the layout, or just do the feasibility? There's a bunch of professional work that has to get done. And as an example, in Whistler, before we had the housing authority, we had the housing society, and it was a volunteer organization like the ones you mentioned early on, Robin. And it did manage to get some funding from CMHC and build one project, a 30-unit project, which is still there today and has worked out really well, and the mortgage has all been paid off, and that's great. But beyond that, they just couldn't get anywhere because they were all volunteers, and you need somebody who's actually being paid to do that. So definitely there needs to be a funding model, but it doesn't have to be a housing corporation. It can be a housing society, but that doesn't matter so much. What matters is that it's a professional body and it has funding and it has responsibility to produce housing, and that's how it's measured, and that's what so many of these communities, certainly our size, don't have. They keep looking to try to work with the various funders, and when they, it takes staff time, but it's not really staff's job. So it needs to be, this responsibility needs to be assigned somewhere. And so, and it's got to be somebody that's on Bowen, that's coordinating it and understanding Bowen, certainly with great partnerships with all the others we've mentioned.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Tim. Lois, I'd love to hear from you. What are your thoughts?
Again, no development background, but this is more an observation, not a solution. With respect to Whistler, for example, it's there may be the housing corporation, but it's still so unaffordable and no one can be there. And then there's this conflict between, you've got 11 people living in a house because they've come over to work, and then there's more, 40,000 square foot homes going up. And I see that similar conflict happening on Bowen, that we sort of oppose housing. So the struggle that the distillery had and the pub had, to jump through various hoops and having to have staff housing included. And then we've got our big properties out on the, southern end of the island. So I just feel that there's always opposition, and, how do we get around that when that comes? Because the noble thing is, yeah, we need more housing, but there always seem to be obstacles. That's my observation.
Yeah. No, and thanks for that. Yeah, Tim, did you want to come in?
Yeah, so in Whistler, yes, there's still an affordable housing problem, but we essentially, after the formation of the Housing Authority, there were 1,000 units built over a period of 10 years in partnerships with developers, and we have I think it's something in the order of 6,000 beds of affordable housing in Whistler now. So there is, and that is housing a good portion of our workforce in Whistler. So it can happen, but it takes a council deciding to assign that responsibility to a professional organization, and having a diverse board of directors that includes developers, municipal staff, councilors, and members of the community.
Yeah. And I think the other point I was going to make, and thanks for the stats, I can't remember how many it was. I feel like it was 1,500 or 2,000 units, so different from the bed count that Whistler's created. And I think to your point was, and it's still not enough. They've been doing it for 20 years. They've created like hundreds and a couple thousand units, and there's still 11 people in a house. So like that is the urgency. We have to start now. And if I've learned anything from this Birch project, which was started however many years ago, and we're still several years away, assuming we get some funding this fall, it takes a long time to build buildings, right? It takes a long time to get funding happening. So like we really need to get going as soon as possible. And the other point from all the great discussion we've been having is on top of funding, and I think I've sort of maybe put it already in my list, is giving the mandate and the resources. So the funding is part of the resource, but also the land, which I know we have community land, and I think council mayor are generally willing to have land used for housing, but I think one of the parts of the discussion, and maybe it's a further discussion, is like, how do we facilitate this? So we say, okay, you're in charge, whoever it is, it's a person, it's an organization, it's Birch, it's somebody else. Okay, you're going to do it, but you also need to give them the resources. Like, here, you have this bit of land. We want this many units in this many years. Have at her. And we're going to give you the funding each year to employ a person, and you need to get it done. So like, it's making sure you actually give them the room, the space, the resources to actually get the project done. Whereas, and I don't want to say this is how it could go, but you can imagine the steps if it had to be like, okay, do this and then come back and check, and do this and come back and check, or we need this approval, or we need that. So there's got to be a balance, right? Somewhere in there between having to like check in on every single step. That's going to take forever, but also you do want to have oversight. So I think that's where, that structure, the board makeup, the responsibility. So you definitely want to have input from the community, from the council and mayor, but you also want to make sure that whoever that organization, that entity that has that mandate to move forward also has a little bit of freedom to move, and get this done at a certain pace. Because I think we can all agree government, for all sorts of great reasons, takes a long time to get stuff done, right? Like there's so many, stops along the way. So I personally, I haven't seen any other hands yet, so I'll jump in with kind of my personal thoughts. I think it's going to be some combination here. And again, we can get caught up in the names or whatever, but it's more about whether it's called a housing corporation, whether it's called a community land trust, it's some entity that's exactly going to be given some amount of funding, and we have to determine where that comes from, to employ a person. And it doesn't even have to be full-time. I think it could be a part-time role, that they're, like you say, when Tim said, you wake up every morning, they say, this is my job. My job is to create this housing on Bowen. I've got funding to employ myself. I've got resources to get done. I've got land. I've got a mandate. those kinds of things. So that's, I think, what we're looking to find. So I guess, is there any further discussion on this point? We're sort of an hour into our meeting. I think we've got a few other things in the agenda. Does anybody have any final thoughts or anything we want to? Oh, okay. So we got Fritz and Daniel. So Fritz, go ahead.
Yeah, listening to all of this, I do think it's important that it is at arm's length from the municipality, because if it's part of the municipality, I think it's too much influenced by internal pressures. You know, like it's just I think the power of something that is at arm's length is unfiltered. You know, like they can actually say what they want.
I think that's a great point. Yeah. Okay. Daniel, go ahead.
Oh, just in terms of the overall agenda for the committee, the whole, I just know I've had over the summer and probably the spring, I've had some conversations with people about the cluster zoning and specifically like reviewing that cluster zoning report with them and highlighting that it is coming to council for committee of the whole in September. So I think having some, like that report is not just going for information, but like that report had recommendations for council and looking for some sort of resolution from council, even to indicate like, oh, that would be interesting to see an application that does this, or no, we're not interested in that. That's not what we're thinking.
Yeah. Okay, that's a great point. Maybe Steph, are you able to bring up your sort of draft agenda there? Maybe that's what we'll go to next. Is we'll just spend a couple of minutes, maybe sort of finalizing what we think is a good draft agenda, and I want to make sure to put in. Let's see what we were up to. So yeah, maybe we'll take, oh, there it is, great. So let's take the cluster report and put it down as number 4 or 5. So again, it'll have an intro for information, but then we'll get into a more robust discussion. I think that's great. Thanks, Daniel. And then I'm just trying to think the work that Mark and I might do on some research. So where does, just seeing if we've got that down. So yeah, maybe we'll make another point sort of 6. Again, we can kind of reorder these a little bit, which is, and happy to get some feedback here on what we title kind of my discussion here on, you know, the model moving forward for Bowen, you know, for housing, or I'm not quite sure how to, we can wordsmith that later, but yeah, so the next point being, you know, yeah, so a model for moving housing, non-market housing forward on Bowen, something like that. And that'll be a discussion with, you know, we can present the research on kind of here's the models, here's some success stories. Maybe in that there's going to be some lessons learned as well, and then get into a discussion just like we had. Here are these models. What do they all mean? What's the best way to move forward? Am I missing anything out of all the discussions that we've had today? And I can't see everybody, so jump in if you, go ahead, Fritz.
You know, when I reread the report and it says 2022, I personally kind of realized that a lot happens in 1 year. And that I feel, to be honest, I feel it's a bit too modest, too careful. What if council would want to be a little bit more proactive and at least be informed that they can be, and then it's up to them to either do it or not. You know what I mean? Because like rezoning, I also find it's kind of a clumsy way of getting things done. You know what I mean? So for instance, like if a cluster zone is created, right? Then in my mind, that is a tool for council to use it for spot zoning, right? They can basically put it anywhere, you know, whereas to insert it in neighborhoods. But what I think a lot of communities will do is that they look at their huge single family areas and think from, do we simply have to make some modest amendments to the single family zoning bylaw? And, you know, the comment that large houses are built on Bowen Island, well, we do some of those, our office. And the only reason is that there are these big lots that allow people to do that. And they will. So it is actually Bowen Island who facilitates these larger houses to be built. We have now one house in the city of Vancouver on an expensive lot on, like, you know, just above Jericho Beach, right? And the owners are waiting until council finally makes up their mind what you can do with single family lots, right? So, but what I'm saying is that if it says somewhere that council can, they can discuss it, they may not be in favor of it, or they may think it's too much too fast, which I don't believe it is actually, but that on single family lots that are zoned single family, that there is more potential. Like for instance, as you know, the city of Vancouver now allows duplexes, threeplexes already on single family lots. The only thing is that they control it with preserving the single family character. But some of those things are out there, and I think it should not be that we assume that council is so hesitant and that we have to go forward with a pilot project. You know, before we do that and go through that whole process, then what? You know, if you say, well, it's kind of urgent and something needs to happen, we're working on all over Metro Vancouver. We're working in areas where the subdivisions are done in the 50s and in the 60s. So are you surprised that it doesn't work for today's needs? No. So like if it's more presented like that, then, and of course we have the Islands Trust, and I found it really nice in this meeting, and I think that Danielle's done a great job on that, is that these additional density for smaller homes actually went through, you know, because it actually sets an example, and people don't have to be necessarily afraid of it. And a lot of people are moving or are staying in the big houses because they'll stay in the neighborhoods, you know. So I think the response from a lot of people will actually be positive.
So I think what I'm getting
from, I think that what I actually thought is that, but it's, you know, we spent a lot of time on it, but in a way I kind of feel that we should have another meeting and see if we can make a bit more powerful options. Like, it doesn't mean councillors should do it, but at least they get into in a way of thinking about it, you know?
Well, maybe what's that realized for me, Steph, is maybe let's also move the update from Daniel on these potential provincial zoning things, and let's make kind of a subject of zoning. And so it'll be Daniel's kind of update on the province, and then we talk about cluster zoning. And then maybe it's a bit more like, Fritz, what I got from you were saying is a little bit more discussion with council on zoning and what it means and how to use it as a tool. And then, yeah, maybe you and I can meet separately and review that zoning report and see if we want to maybe just kind of update some of the language ahead of this meeting, and just, you know, yeah, make some clear recommendations on how we think we should move it forward. Does that sound good, Fritz? We can. Yeah,
I think there should be a review, and we have to do that fairly quickly if this goes fairly soon to council, right?
Yeah. Okay, great. So I've got to set.
Is that captured correctly then, Robin? Bullet number 4, zoning. 1 Daniel's update from the province. 2 the cluster zoning report. This will be you and Fritz.
Yeah, and then I would make recommendations, actions as like C. So we'd have that as sort of almost a separate one. So yeah, okay, good. So I've got to set a meeting with Fritz, a meeting with Mark. Okay, so I don't think we need to like necessarily vote on this or anything, but more just like final words, final feedback before we move along to the next things. Everybody's kind of generally okay with this. It might get, you know, shuffled a little bit, but I think we'll sort of start with the sort of data and information, move into the zoning discussion. I might move up the sort of my discussion of model for housing moving forward, and then we'll put the MRDT at the end, because again, I think that's kind of going to inform the funding of that. Yeah. Okay. Any final comments before we move along? And I'm not.
So I'll send this to you then, so you can incorporate into it. Okay.
Yeah, and then I guess we probably have to get that back to. Anyways, we'll talk offline about how that gets to council and on their agenda. Okay, let's move along. Thank you, everybody. I really appreciate that. So 5.2 is the Lot 1 expression of interest. So Mark is here from Tomo. We talked about this, I think, at the last meeting. I can't remember if it was that one or the one before. And so I guess we wanted to just kind of revisit it. Everybody hopefully has had time to kind of think about it and digest it. If anyone needs a refresher, maybe Mark can give like a high level one, but essentially it was sort of, Birch and Tomo have been chatting, and there was the expression of interest for the area 2 of Lot 1. We thought it would actually be more beneficial as a first step to look at all of Lot 1, create a phased development plan. So Mark, is there any other quick points you want to do, or we'll sort of jump into discussion or questions?
I'll make a quick point, and then also I'm happy to yield more time because for the MOU item.
Oh, okay, yeah, and I think the MOU, so maybe we'll jump through that. I think the MOU, I'm actually going to ask to defer, and Tim, if you let me know what you think, because I think we need to have the committee of the whole and that high level discussion before we get into any details of it. So if you're okay with that, Tim, I'm actually going to defer that discussion. So thank you, Mark.
Okay,
for being willing. So, but yeah, let's stick with this one.
Okay.
We've got a bit of time.
And so as a quick recap to build on what you just said is that in 2021, Daniel and staff issued a RFP for expression of interest, and outgrew that, Birch and Tomo got together and wishes to extend this work further in that phase development plan. So today, what we're asking is support in the sense of, is this a good idea? But we're not asking for a financial support.
Thanks, Mark. That's a good point. So I guess what I'm hoping to get out of this is that the Housing Advisory Committee, and happy for Daniel or Steph to jump in. I'd love it if we could make like basically a recommendation that, and I don't know if it's to staff or council, you guys can help me craft this, but it'd be great if the Housing Advisory Committee, if we are in support of it, or the majority in support of it, to make a recommendation to staff and or council that we, move forward. We support Birch and Tomo in moving forward with this. So maybe I'll quickly hand it over to maybe Daniel. Are you the right person, or Steph? Like, what would be the best next steps to kind of move this forward?
I would like just to, Daniel, can you speak, please? I think the recommendation is fine if everyone's agreed. I just need a little more clarity for wording around what it and this is. That
yes, for sure. Yeah, we can wordsmith that. Yeah.
But I guess Morris might have some insight onto process as well, Councillor.
Yeah, Councillor Morris, would you like to
unmute myself here? Okay. So are we talking about all of Lot 1, including Area 1 that has already been rezoned for light industrial and needed sort of commercial areas? Because I'm hearing lots of comments from people that we need certain things and they would fit into Area 1. So I'm quite happy to do a comprehensive plan for the rest of the areas, 2, 3, and 4, but I'm not keen on including Area 1, where a lot of time was spent on doing a rezoning, and it does still allow for residential. But that's the only area that I can see on the island where we can put some of this. And light industrial isn't the right word. It's like somebody who's got a woodworking shop. They need a place. And somebody wants to open up a commercial kitchen. So that needs a place. So that's you bring up a really important point, and I want to make it very, very clear. This is not about a rezoning exercise. This is about the rezoning's been done, and maybe we identified changes need to be made, but that's not the intention. The intention is to take from the zoning that exists now, that all the work's been done. How do we take this from where it is now to being ready for somebody to build on it? So it's about saying, so why we're sort of calling it a phased development plan. So the zoning's there. How do we actually, we need to put infrastructure in, we need to put roads, we probably need to subdivide some lots. We need to think about, is it housing? Is how much light industrial, how much of what those different workshops you're talking about, what does that look like? And then what are the steps that move forward to actually get that built? Because it's been zoned, which is great, but it's been zoned for quite a number of years now and nothing has happened yet. So that's what we see as the opportunity here, is all this work's been done to date, and how do we actually get it from this point to that point where you can actually get somebody to build something on that lot. So it's definitely not about redoing any work that has been done. It's about actually carrying forward, taking all the work that's been done and now taking it that next step. So yes, that's a great point. Yeah. So what is the actual resolution?
Yeah, so we haven't worded it yet.
We
haven't worded it yet. So that's just what I'm. Yep. So if there, I can't see everybody. So do jump in if you have a thought or a question here.
Well, I like your word about how we move forward to implement.
Yes.
Because like point 1 in our minutes, master planning the whole lot. Master planning to me means a rezoning of the whole lot.
Right. So that was maybe something we could rework in the
Yeah.
minutes. That was, I sort of had some thought.
Well, that was
minutes that I-
the minutes from the last one. So that was comments, but yeah. So
yeah, that's
anyhow,
why I think
just what's the resolution? Nobody's crafted one then.
I've
We
got
have
something,
not.
but I don't know if it's
Great.
right. I can put it up.
Yeah, that's great. So, and then I
You
can
have
say, I
enough?
think,
Mm.
yeah, please, if you can put it up, Steph, that'd be great, and we can
Okay.
wordsmith it. But I think if this doesn't work, but we did think very carefully about the idea of it's a phased master plan, and I liked your word, Allison, there with implementation. It's about taking the existing zoning and working towards implementation and construction of buildings. You know, I don't want to say housing because it's actually about more than housing. Okay, making that council
There, use
support
all the
Virgin
words.
Yeah, developing
Every
a
word.
phased. So I think if I want to take out the master, okay, so phased development. So let's take out comprehensive because I don't think we need it unless people feel strongly about that. And I want to take out the word master because I think, like Allison said, I think it's distracting people about like a master plan and rezoning, and that's not what this is about. So it's a developing.
Okay, so a
it's
phased implementation plan for the development of areas.
Yep. Okay,
Remove
that
the
sounds
word
great.
development.
So phased implementation plan.
Yeah, so support Birch and Tomo spaces in drafting, because it would have to be approved by council. So support Birch and Tomo spaces in drafting a phased implementation plan for the development of areas 2, 3, and 4 of lot 1. Yeah.
No, so it would be all of lot 1. I want to make that very clear. So it's actually looking at all
Okay,
of
so
lot
let's
1.
say for the development of areas 2, 3, and 4 in particular, and also considering lot 1, area 1. Because
I'm going to disagree with you. I think that Mark and I would like to consider all of lot 1. And
okay,
we can definitely get into the details. Like this is sort of the, like, let's do a handshake and say, yes, let's work together. And then we're very happy to have a follow-up meeting where it's like, here's what we'd like you to look, or we can basically draft, say, here's what we're planning to look at, and then get council to say, yes, that sounds great. So we'd have to craft, say, a work plan or something along those lines. And maybe Mark, if you want to jump in, if I'm speaking out of turn, but that would be one of our next steps. As we get the support, then we would sort of draft kind of a plan, and then that would be something we'd move forward with.
Yes, and to connect some of these thoughts is, yes, Robin, we thought it was important that the potential for lot 1 and activating it to include housing and other uses is best served if we can explore the entire lot 1 in the context of also all the connecting neighborhoods around it. So that's one. And then definitely acknowledging that while we're doing our work, as we're getting feedback, including the one that Councillor Morris just talked about, we're not trying to reinvent the wheel. So we'll definitely respect that a lot of thought and work has been done with the rezoning of that specific area within lot 1.
So actually what I might suggest, these are always fun stuff. At the beginning, let's do a whereas.
Yeah,
so,
baby.
Yeah.
Whereas, much work has, and I'm just gonna like say it out loud, we can wordsmith in a minute, whereas, work has been done to date, rezoning lot 1, work has been done on master plans for Snug Cove as a whole. And then we want to build on all of that and move it forward. So it's, again, it's unquote there, Steph. It's more about, we want to build on all of the work that's been done and take it to the next step. So I think that's what we want to make that really, really clear. To anybody who reads this, it is not about reinventing and redoing work. It's about taking all the work that's been done and moving it forward.
Okay, so but none of the Snug Cove master planning ever included lot 1.
No, but it would taking all of that into account. So essentially that would be the work that we take into account. So it's about saying all this great work has been done in the past. Let's take that all into consideration and now move forward.
So throw in area 1 in front of lot 1, because that's the only rezoning. Well, no, I guess we've done some rezoning for the rest of it. Yeah.
So whereas work has been done. I know it's not worded well, but I kind of want to say where, maybe whereas in acknowledgement of all the work done to date, because I just want to say, like, we acknowledge it and we're aware of it and we want to build on it. So I kind of just want to say.
Well, why are you saying acknowledging and building on all the work that has been done to date?
Sorry, say that again, Allison.
In acknowledging and building on.
Okay, that sounds
Or
great.
furthering. Yeah.
And building on, sure.
Or furthering.
Yeah, for sure. Put all the words in, Steph. Do it.
All the words.
Yeah, change building to furthering. Change building on to furthering.
Or just okay.
Yeah.
She's got furthering in there. So acknowledging and furthering all the work done to date, rezoning lot 1.
I feel like the whereas is the act of acknowledging.
Okay. Yeah, if I don't want to.
You're putting a whereas in, you're acknowledging something.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Or
whereas we acknowledge or something like.
Okay.
I think you can take out the word whereas, just say in acknowledging.
Oh, okay.
Well,
oh, that's a little.
I think you have to have a whereas at the beginning of a resolution.
Thank
otherwise
you.
can't put it there.
Yeah.
Whereas HAC, there we go. There we go. I got it. Grammatically sound now.
Acknowledges and wishes to further.
Yes.
And so maybe further that the work done to date, rezoning lot 1, and previous master planning, for Snug Cove.
Sorry, that has been done to date.
You needed that after work.
You know where we are.
Whereas
Extensive work that has been done to date.
That has been done to date, rezoning lot 1.
Okay.
And master planning for Snug Cove.
Okay.
Okay.
And then delete that next sentence.
And then the next whereas is fine.
Whereas there is need to advance and implement the ideas formulated, therefore be resolved. The Housing Advisory Committee recommended Council support Birch. And Birch, we can fill out the rest of it. Resilient, that's great. Community housing, tone spaces and I'd like to say creating. I don't know if there's a difference between creating. Because I think at the end, through the process that we hope to plan, which is lots of engagement and all those kinds of things, we would create a plan. And of course, then that would have to go to council to be adopted. But I think it's about creating a plan. So a phased implementation plan for the development of all of lot 1 of the community lands, including, I'd like to take out including design and installation of services, because I think it's just, exactly. For the development of lot 1. Okay, how does that look to everybody? Any comments or thoughts? And again, I can't see everybody, so you might just have to. Oh, Ron, I can see your head. Okay, go for it.
Okay, so Robin, when you've deleted the words, including the roads. So if I could be a bit of a devil's advocate here. A plan the step 1 in the plan would be design where the roads would go.
Yes. So do you want us to detail that in this? Is it useful to say it would include, roads, services, types of mix of housing?
Well, that's the thing. Your plan can be a bunch of steps. First step, design the roads. Second step, ascertain where the services are. Third step. So you haven't really advanced much. You just said we got to do all this in order to advance it. So I think by being a little more specific.
So I would take out installation though, because we're definitely not installing.
I don't know the words. Okay.
No, that's okay. That's okay. So it would include, including maybe, and just to cover everything, including but not limited to. Design of roads, services, types and mix of housing, and other uses, because we want to make sure that's in there. Sorry, I can't see everybody's hands. Ron, you had your hand up. Did you want to jump in?
Yes, line 2, you need a that after work.
Okay. Extensive work. Thank you. That. Okay.
Was it Fritz that was trying to say something?
Go ahead, Fritz.
Yeah, I just kind of this is a very how do you call it? It's a phase. It's a iterative kind of process. You know what I mean? And so I think it's true that the layout of the roads is totally key, but to do that, that requires a lot of consulting. Like there's geotechnical, there is civil engineering. It's a big deal. So I think maybe.
Can I jump in, Fritz? Maybe we add schematic design.
Well,
schematic design of road services, because it's meant to be high level. It's meant to be a master plan, right?
Yeah, no, but I don't know if you actually have to mention the roads and all that, because it's a logical outcome. But what I'm saying is that if you go through the process and you first have your first objectives, right? And then, for instance, like to which degree is our roads needed? I don't even know if they're needed. You know what I mean? It just kind of depends. So like, but it does, the moment you draw the road, it facilitates, but it also limits. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? So that has to be done correctly. It isn't that simple. You draw a road, you build a road, and the rest of it is a result of it. I don't think so. So like I don't know if you have to be specific about it, because it's a logical result of the process. There's all kinds of things. There's environmental, you know. That's, you don't have to mention all that. If there's a concept, it's almost it's too soon to put it in, because it feels like if there's a great concept that comes out of this and it's kind of, you know, people feel part of it, and then the roads are just a result of it.
There's been a certain amount of background work done already on the whole lot, especially a fair amount done on Area 1, because we did that for the fire hall.
Yeah, so if Bowen Island's engineering department can basically respond and take part in that exercise, then I can see that later the plan isn't just kind of ignored because it's all based on the road being in the wrong spot, or not providing enough development potential, or being too expensive, or I don't know. You know?
So I wonder if instead of being specific, because I hear what Allison's saying, and again, thinking of the public too, you'd want to be a little clear about it. And Mark, jump in. I'm thinking maybe, do we add something along the lines of, you know, the next steps would be to sort of, you know, collaboratively create the outline for, you know, and deliverables with, I'm thinking with staff, that's the most appropriate, but something along those lines, just to acknowledge that, like, it's not just you saying, yeah, and then we're running. It's like, no, we actually do want to work collaboratively, again, likely the planning department, to kind of create what that is, what that looks like in terms of what do you think, Mark? Is it?
Yeah, Robin, I'll add in some of the thinking and writing that we had done for the proposal. And I support what Frith just said, is that this is an exploration. And so the words that we had used previously was to coordinate with infrastructure plans with staff. And then second, the way we worded it was to integrate transportation, energy, and environmental considerations. So that left it a bit looser. That's appropriate for this stage of work.
Yeah. So would it be maybe, so the next steps include collaborative creating would it be a scope of work and work plan and deliverables? Like, what sort of, is there a all-encompassing kind of phrase that we could say to basically say, next step, Tomo, Birch, and the planning department work together to create the thing? Like, what are we going to do, and what are we going to deliver, and what are the limitations, and what's the scope? Can anybody think of a way to word that?
And there's been a lot of work done. Like, we used to have, excuse me, an infrastructure committee, and they did a lot of work on that lot. And I think in preparation for the big community lands workshop, there was a bunch of work done.
Yeah.
And I've got a whole bunch of studies that we did for when we were looking at Area 1 for the fire hall.
Great. So okay, so can we keep it as, I mean, this is a little clumsy maybe, but including collaboratively creating a scope of work plan, and deliverables with BIM staff. I think that sums it up, unless anybody has any comments. And I take out any of the stuff afterwards, Steph. I don't think we're going to be specific about, you know, we'll do that, but I don't think we need to word it in here. That's kind of the next step, is to you know, lay that all out. Does anybody have any comments or thought on the wording? Daniel, please. Yes.
Sorry. Just in terms of like what you're recommending council do. So support Birch, Tomo in doing it. And so it might be like direct staff to collaboratively create a scope of work plan, and deliverables.
Okay.
Or work with Birch. And Tomo.
Direct staff to work with. And then it's like, and something about like reporting back, like, you know, the direction is to report back to council, or that it's clear that, like, okay, when that scope of work plan, deliverables, it's like that gets reported back to council. Is that the next check-in point? Like, that is as far as council's directing, or is council directing like an open-ended thing that eventually would come back with a like full phased implementation plan. That's what I'm not sure, and not sure what
Maybe I'll
council would want to do.
Put that to Tim and Allison, or I guess that's what council, because they're going to look at this,
Yeah.
right, and say, yes, we're going to support it or not. And then maybe that's the sort of question is, what's the next check-in? Yeah, like, is it that we create that and then council says, yep, go, once they've looked at that plan and they say, yes, go, or you're saying is now the go, and we just work with staff directly ongoing. So I don't know if maybe Tim or Allison, if you have feedback on that.
Well, yeah, I was going to ask what support meant.
Yeah.
So whether you want that council concurs with Bowen Island creating a phased municipal plan, and that council directs staff to work collaboratively with Birch and Tomo to create a scope of work. Because I guess, do you just give them, are you just giving Birch and Tomo a carte blanche to go and design something? Or
I guess this is like support, and then but the council, like the staff would just be directed to do that first step, essentially scope of work plan, deliverables, and then it's clear that okay, we're checking into council at that point if in terms of staff direction, because council can't really direct Birch and Tomo,
no,
right? But they can direct the like staff collaborative work.
Okay,
but is it support or is it agrees with? I mean,
support.
Yeah, I like support because it means that, yes, we work with you, and we're not asking for financial support. It's more of a like, yes, we as municipality, want to work with you.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, so maybe it says that council supports and after spaces take out the word in. The council supports Birch and Tomo creating a phased implement. Yeah.
Okay. And then I think
and an S on support, Steph.
Pardon?
I just supports S.
No, it's not. It's a subjunctive. It comes after that. It's no S after it.
I hated English. I took science degree, so I didn't have to take English.
You leave the English majors to the S's.
Good job, Steph. And the only thing I'll change, Steph, in that last sentence, we want to take out master planning because we want to make clear that that's not part of it. So deliverables regarding, and it's wordy, but we'll just do the phased implementation plan. Let's just copy and paste that term. Okay. Yeah.
Phased implementation plan.
Yeah.
And we use the word work a lot in this whole thing. Maybe I'll tweak it after.
I think it is what it is, right?
Okay.
So why don't I read this all out? So whereas the Housing Advisory Committee acknowledges and wishes to further the extensive work that's been done to date rezoning Lot 1 of the community lands and master planning Snow Cove, and whereas there is a need to advance and implement this planning work, therefore be it resolved that the Housing Advisory Committee recommend that council support Birch and Tomo Spaces creating a phased implementation plan for the development of, I think we can just say Lot 1. I don't think we have to say anything further. Lot 1 of the community lands, and that council direct staff to work collaboratively with Birch and Tomo Spaces to create a scope of work plan and deliverables for the, I would say for the phased implementation plan of Lot 1 and report back to council. I think that sounds all good. Mark, does that look good from your point of view? Yep. And again, I can't see everybody in my view. So Ron. Yep, there we go.
In the second reference, Tomo Spaces should be plural.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. Okay, anything else? All right, if that's all good. And now, just careful. Is it okay that I vote on this, Steph, or should I like step back? Because it's kind of, I don't know. I'm always a little confused on these things.
Are you going to make any money?
Not from council. So yeah, okay. I'm not making any money from council. Okay, great. So
do Greg and Lois want to say anything on that?
Oh yeah, good. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Do you, Greg or Lois, have any comments or thoughts?
No, I actually like it. I think it's great.
Great. Okay.
Whatever can help move things forward is a good thing.
Yeah, exactly. That's how we feel. Okay, great. So does somebody want to move? Thank you, Ron. Second. Lois, thank you. All in favor? And I can't quite see everybody, so if I'm not seeing any objections. Okay, excellent. Thank you so much, everybody.
Right. So thank you, committee members.
That's exciting.
Yeah, it's very exciting. Yeah, we're really excited to move forward. Okay, so we'll quickly move on because I apologize, everybody. We are over time. I thought we had to 11:30, but I'm just looking at my agenda and we only had to 11. So we are skipping 5.3. We're going to defer that. The only thing we had was staff updates and then council updates. So we'll just go through those quickly and then we'll adjourn. And apologies for being over time here. So staff updates.
Sure. Just to say, I did submit the fund the Housing Accelerator Fund application in August. It was a bit of a push, but we got done just before the deadline. And then the province extended the deadline till mid-September.
Oh,
Had submitted. So, you know, the fund initially said, oh, we'll let people know by the end of summer. And now we won't know until later.
Yeah. Okay. Well, great. Thank you, Daniel. I know that was not a small amount of work, so that's awesome. Thank you. And then council updates. Council Morris, Council Wake, is there anything?
I don't think so.
No?
I think
Okay.
The main
I
one
just-
was
we just
the
done it all.
rezoning.
Perfect. Okay.
I hate to do this, but
then don't do it.
no. In the list of things for the meeting with council, is the
Oh,
housing needs report in there?
Yes, it is in there for information. Yeah.
Okay, because I missed it in the list in the.
I think it might not be on the agenda list. Oh,
Yeah, well,
housing targets report.
We'll make
housing
sure
needs
it's
report.
on.
Yeah, I
as
think
a-
it needs to be
Okay,
there
so-
for information. And
Perfect.
so a follow up to that, is there any chance? I think that was all done on 2016 census data.
Yeah.
I guess I haven't looked at the census data to see if those same things that were quoted are in the 2021 detail yet or not.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'd have to look back at the report and
Yeah.
what it shows. So,
Yeah.
and I think we did the housing targets report. I think, was it
Oh,
earlier this year or
housing
last
needs
year?
report.
And that's probably a little more current. So we can look at that as well. That's in there.
Well, it's in
Okay.
there. So yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. Okay, great. So we'll make sure that's on the agenda. And thank you, everybody. Apologies that we're over time. And do we have our next meeting date and stuff? And
No,
since
I think there, I went to set one and it looks like Daniel's Fridays are problematic.
Oh.
Okay,
I think it was
set
this
one for next
Some of those
month,
stuff,
that'd
I
be
have the regional, like the metro meetings, so I don't actually attend, but
You
they
don't
show
go
up
to
on
them?
my
Okay.
calendar. No.
So why don't we throw a dart at, okay, where are we now?
Well, sometime after our meeting with council.
Yeah.
Yes. So
So
I'd say
council's on
like,
the 25th. So the 29th might be close. What about October? Oh, yeah, Daniel off.
Oh, that right.
That
Okay,
one's
so I could
real.
do that one's, yeah, but I could
That
do the
one's real.
13th.
So the 29th is right after the cluster zoning. You guys might be exhausted, or the house.
if the 13th works for Steph and capacity and all that,
Yeah.
and other people.
Oh, so that's
that
House
would be-
Down Community Forum. Is anybody
No,
going?
that doesn't work for council.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. House Down Community Forum.
And then neither does the 20th because council
Oh,
has
yes.
planning.
Strategic planning.
We have done
And
Monday
Friday the
mornings
6th?
too.
Okay.
Yeah. We've
So
done
let's
Monday
try,
mornings as well.
So we've got Truth and Reconciliation Day on the 2nd. The municipality's closed on that day. So
Yeah,
why don't we
and
try on the 9th? Oh, that's
Thanksgiving.
Thanksgiving.
That's
Thanksgiving.
Does the 16th work for people, Monday?
It's open for Daniel.
Yeah.
And
What did we say about Friday the 6th?
I'm
off.
away and Daniel's away.
Oh, okay.
And I'm away.
Yeah, there you go.
All right, where are you guys all going? Oh,
They
it's
got
Thanksgiving
life.
weekend, right? Okay, that's all right with me.
what did we like? What was the last one?
Monday the 16th?
Monday the 16th. Okay.
Hearing no objections. Okay. we will see
I
you
would have to
then.
leave a bit earlier. I have a shift at the art gallery. But
Okay.
starts at
Thank
11.
you.
So I'll just leave
Okay.
a bit early.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. And then we'll probably, and obviously everybody's welcome to come to the committee of the whole. So
Yes, please do.
we will,
Please do.
please attend. And that's on the 25th or whatever the date is. And then we'll see you at our meeting on October 16th. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for
And the
discussion
committee of the
today.
whole is an in-person meeting at council chambers,
Right.
but you
And you-
can watch it by Zoom. But if you came in person, I think that it's
yeah,
More
easier.
powerful.
I plan to be there in person. Yeah, I think it'll be a easier discussion if possible. Okay, great. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a great rest of
Thank
your day.
you.
Hey, talk soon. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.